Welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with you today to have a very timely conversation about how do we create trusting brands, how do we build trusting companies and the right relationships with all of our stakeholders. And I think we're all aware of the challenges we've seen lately, some missteps that have been some learnings for very large brands recently, United, perhaps Pepsi and others. And now, in this time, we see more and more attention to these issues. I was just checking out Fast Company's cover story this month about putting our values to work, lessons from a wide array of companies. And fortunately, today we have with us companies who, large and small, who are really innovating in this area and who've faced challenges, but also have turned them into opportunities. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today. We're also at a moment where we hear every day challenges to our environment, social conflicts, and a greater responsibility being put on all of us, including companies, and perhaps particularly companies. Last week, I heard a quote on Spaceship Earth: "There are no passengers, we are all crew." And I think that's increasingly true today. So please join me in welcoming, we have Jeff Seabright on my far left. He's Chief Sustainability Officer at Unilever. We have Cameron Saul, who's the founder of Bottletop. We have Brian Norgard, who's Head of Product and Revenue at Tinder. We have David Denholm, who's CEO of Kashi, and Joanne Bradford, who's our Chief Operating Officer at SoFi. So welcome. I wanted to open with just a level setting for all of us, because we may know some of these brands, but we may be wondering why are they on this panel for this discussion about social and environmental impact and leadership in corporate responsibility. But also we have some new brands on the panel. So I wanted to go to each of you to ask you to share with me a bit about who you are as a company and why you're here having this discussion with us today. So I'll start with Joanne.
Great. So SoFi started about 6 years ago, really building a product that didn't exist in the financial service category, which was student loan refinancing, because interest rates were really high. Our founder decided that if he refied student loans at a lower rate and then resold them to the alumni associations, that it could be a good business. We ended up doing, we've done about $18 billion in loans, and we have about 275,000 members. And we have a little video. It's a community ad that I'll show you and tell you the story of, if you want to roll that video. So just a funny story about SoFi. We bought a spot if the Super Bowl went into overtime, and it did. And so we had given them that creative that was just from our member community. Those are all people that are members that had submitted their pictures for us to participate in a contest to pay back their loans. But really, I mean, I attended Michael Milken's discussion at lunch, and, living a meaningful life. And we have a category of people that we offer financial products to that want to have that life, that ambition and meeting and all of those things. And so we try to build products and services that align with those things. And it's loans, wealth management, mortgages, all online, all done with speed and transparency. And the goal is to make sure that they can, live their dream and follow their ambition. So we have career counselors, 12 career counselors that coach them if they lose their job, because it's good for our underwriting if we get them a job quickly. We have an entrepreneur program that lets them pause their loan if they want to start a business, because we think that's a good investment. We have community events. We do 500 events. Tonight we'll have an event on wealth planning, one in Los Angeles tomorrow night. And then we do some dating events, because the most important thing to people in life is their relationships and their careers, and then being able to afford to do those things. So that's our mission, and our goal is to just always try to make our members' lives better, and our employees live that value, and our values are really speed, transparency, and alignment, because transparency is most important. A lot of people look us up and say, is SoFi legit? Someone told me today they applied for a mortgage and they didn't believe their rates were true. That's too good to be true. And that's the number one question we get from people is like, is it legit? Is it too good to be true? And the answer is, it's not too good to be true. You've earned it. We'll give you a great product if we're aligned. So that's who we are.
Thank you. Do you see others in your sector following suit or taking some lessons from you all, perhaps, and putting them into practice?
I was talking to someone on the panel before this competition, right? Like everybody tries to knock us off pixel for pixel, but there's a lot behind the scenes, from our capital markets team to our operations to the technology. Someone earlier today said, well, you're not as technically advanced as other people. And I said, yes, but they don't have the volume, the operations, the profits, or the consumer base, but they may have a few better engineers, right? So I will trade those things at this moment in time because you can catch up in that. So there's always competitors, but they're either too big or too small. So we feel like we're in a pretty good spot right now.
Thanks. So Kashi, it seems like the core of the business is to make us all healthier. So beyond that, though, tell us a bit about your company and how you're really taking that impact to scale.
Thank you, Aimée, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about social and environmental impact. Kashi is not a new company. We were founded in 1984 by a couple of entrepreneurs, Phil and Gail Torber, in San Diego, who are passionate about plant-based nutrition, and they really saw an American breakfast starved of plant-based protein and fiber and came up with a solution. Rolling forward, the team at Kashi is still very passionate about nutrition and health, but we can't just focus on people health without also considering planet health. So we really want to bring our inventors' mindset to advancing planet health, and we're particularly passionate about increasing access to organic food. Despite double-digit increases in demand in the United States for organic food, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, less than 1% of US farmland is organic. Now, that's quite surprising, and so we have worked on this issue, and one of the big challenges is it takes 3 years for a farm to transition from conventional farming techniques to organic farming. And even after those 3 years, you then have to apply to the USDA for organic certification. But during those 3 years, you have to use organic practices, but you're not rewarded with higher prices for your crop. And what many farmers face is the need to put in place new infrastructure. They might have to buy new silos to isolate crops, new farm management plans. They might have to renegotiate loans, etc. And that's a barrier, despite the fact that there is ultimately a prize of selling organic food in 3 years' time. So we work with a third party, Quality Assurance International. They are one of a number of organic certifying bodies in the United States. And we partnered with them and some other stakeholders to develop a certified transitional mark. And this is a protocol, it's an open source protocol that's available to brands to use to actually enable consumers to have a very transparent understanding of food that is sourced from farms going through transition. And as a result, we reward farmers with a slightly higher price for their crop. And so this is something we're incredibly passionate about. And the big thing is we can all make an impact to this. We can identify, we're probably buying products today on the shelf that have part ingredients from farms going through that transition, but we're not aware of that. So we're doing a big effort to build awareness, be very transparent about this, and launching a number of new products. We've just launched some nut butter bars in January. We feature on those bars Richard, a Californian almond farmer who is transforming his farm from conventional farming techniques to ultimately USDA organic, and consumers can play an active role in creating positive change in our food system, and that's something that I'm personally passionate about, and our team is as well.
Thanks. I mean, so much of this is about educating and engaging those consumers to enable them to make
Yeah,
better
and I think we
choices.
all know, I say to people at work that the Food Network stars are more popular than Mick Jagger now. So people are very interested in food, so much more. These are the high-rating programs, and it's just a great business to be in right now.
Great, thank you. So Brian, Tinder, I mean, a lot of us have heard of the brand. I'm sure some of us have used your app to connect with other people around us, physically located near us. And I think some of the downside stories we heard early on, though, were around what did that do to our self-confidence? So people who didn't get liked or accepted. And so tell us about how Tinder is here on this panel, the kind of conversations you're having around impact and what you all are doing to engage that audience that you have, a powerful audience around these issues.
Sure. I'm sure everyone here is probably wondering what we're doing on the panel. That's okay. Not the first time nor the last. So I'm the Chief Product Officer, and I'm going to tell you a brief story about the genesis of Tinder. So my mentee and I had sold a software company. At this point, this is about 5 years ago, he was 24 years old. He was in the dating market in LA, and he's a very sweet man. And it took a lot of courage for him to go up to meet new people, especially when it came to women. And the fear of rejection was so enormous to him, it really, really stunted him, and he felt like he wasn't meeting new people. So, knock, knock, he came to my door and said, I've got an idea about a new way to do this. So, fast forward 6 years, you look at our data. Our data suggests we have 2 billion swipes a day, 30 million matches, 25 million, or excuse me, the numbers are just so mind-boggling. I was just telling Joanne, I actually can't even hold them in my head anymore. But I think what it indicates is we've sort of cracked a nut, which is the world is a scary place, and meeting new people, leaning forward, saying hello is it is an emotional experience, and not everyone is good at it. And so with the double opt-in, meaning if I like you and you like me, it can incept and open up a conversation. We've created sort of a whole new channel of interaction. And despite the fact that with what we do comes some criticism, we've completely changed the world. And if you look at Brazil, places in Africa, Europe, the brand is thriving and exploding. And even in the US, I've given up on going to weddings because every time I go, it's 5 people that have gotten married that I have to send a gift to. No offense to them. And I think it's changed the whole landscape of how millennials interact and also how we feel about bringing technology into our lives and allowing it to sort of be this thing that sits in the middle. Because what Tinder really is just a vehicle for people to meet new people. And when you think about it, at a gut level, that's so powerful. Yeah. Because Facebook is about who you know, and Instagram is who you aspire to be, and Twitter is your intellectual side. But Tinder represents the first sort of scale application in the history of the world where you lean forward and you actively don't want to know that. You might want to meet that person, but you want someone new. That's a very, very important concept.
Thanks. You also did an interesting campaign with Body Shop where you actually engaged that audience around a specific topic. Do you mind sharing a bit with us about that?
We do this quite a bit. I would actually like to point to the newest campaign we did. Last week, there was an endangered white rhino, so I guess it's the only one left in the world. Obviously, its reproductive health is at sort of a breaking point. They needed to raise $9 million to essentially capture the genetics of this animal, and hopefully, we can, somehow find a way to preserve it. They came to us. We launched a campaign in 11 countries. It was covered, essentially, front page all over the world. Tons of donations. I think they're going to announce that coming forward. But it kind of comes back to this idea that our customers care about certain things. They're willing to take action if it's something that's near and dear to their heart. And we hope to partner with a ton of other brands and organizations to do more stuff like this, because the power of our brand at this point is sort of undeniable.
Yep. I think what's interesting, what we're hearing so far, is there's the core operations and leveraging who you are and what your operations are as a company to make direct impact, but then there's also those side strategies or enabling strategies such as getting more organic acreage in or using your outreach to influence around another topic. And I think that's a great segue to what you're doing at Bottletop. Cameron, the combination of your operations as well as the foundation, you mind sharing with us a little bit about Bottletop?
I'd be delighted to.
Thank you.
Great to be here with you all here at Milken. I'm Cameron Saul, the founder of Bottletop, and we're a sustainable luxury lifestyle brand. And I'm just going to give you a little kind of taster of actually why. Why Bottletop? Why are we here? And why do we do all of what we do? Well, for me, it started when I left school, 19 years old, thinking I was going to go into the fashion industry because that was my family background, and decided to take a risk, to take a chance, and went to Uganda and found myself living up in the mountains, teaching health education for 9 months, particularly focused on the prevention of HIV/AIDS, which at the time was leading to the deaths of 8,000 young people on a daily basis. And if you like, I had my eyes completely opened to the power and importance of health education for young people, and was inspired by them taking on the message, if you like, that we were there to work with them on a creative basis. And while I was in the village, found a handbag made from recycled metal bottle tops, and we launched that bag through a design collaboration with Mulberry internationally. It became the best-selling bag for the brand globally. It was a fully sustainable design. In fact, I think we have an image of that, which the guys could pop up from the slideshow. But what it really showed us through this kind of landslide campaign, which at the time was before any kind of social enterprise was being discussed or any kind of the importance of sustainability within the fashion industry was being addressed, we realized that actually this is what we needed to be talking about, and we really needed to be effectively looking to build a brand around empowerment, around cross-cultural collaboration, as a vehicle to be alleviating poverty and empowering young people with health education. So over the last 15 years, we've really been setting out to do exactly that. And I'll show you a short video clip, actually, which, again, brings to life the essence of the sustainable design with the community impact that we're addressing. So that was kind of a taster of the work that we do at the community, where we have an atelier in Brazil. For those of you who can maybe see this is one of our designs made entirely from recycled materials, from the ring pulls from drinks cans. So we set out to source really upcycled materials and really to pioneer sustainable design in a way that is supportive of our environment, but can really create value for community and, for the environment at each step of our supply chain. I think, we're becoming more aware of the fact that the fashion industry is the world's second most polluting industry, and is, causing a huge amount of destruction. And so I think really we're setting out to create a change and show how it's possible to build both a strong brand and a beautiful product that also has a beautiful impact on an end-to-end basis.
Great, thank you. Jeff, Unilever, massive company, but an interesting differentiator here in that you're not generally directly consumer-facing. So tell us a bit about Unilever's position around impact, social and environmental impact, how you guys are operationalizing that within Unilever, and then a bit perhaps about how you're working with different brands to do so as well.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, thanks. Real privilege to be here on this panel. Just one sentence about Unilever. It's a consumer products company in the home care, personal care, food and refreshments business, touching 2.5 billion consumers on the planet every day in about 180 countries with about 400 brands. So it's a very large, diversified business. In 2010, our CEO, Paul Pullman, laid out a vision for driving the business through purpose called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, which is very much the business plan for what we do at Unilever. And it really lays out what now you would probably say is a roadmap for the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's about nutrition, health, hygiene, environmental stewardship, and creation of wealth opportunities in our value chain, smallholder farmers, small distributors, and startups. So how do we use our business, strengthen our business by actually putting purpose at the core of what we do? It is not CSR. I mean, to be clear, the business model that we're working on is a business model. We don't do philanthropy in that sense. And it really happens at sort of three levels. One is what I would call footprint, which is making sure that we have our house in order, 100% renewable energy here in North America, for example, zero waste to landfill worldwide, achieved last year, 100% recyclable packaging target, but really about sort of do no harm, sort of footprint. But the second level is around handprint, and that is what we have as a business, what we can do to really help change business as usual, to drive the kind of transformational change that we're going to need to see if we want to achieve the kinds of aspirations for sustainable and inclusive growth in the SDGs. And for us, that has to do with using the power of our supply chain to help with avoided deforestation. So we're a big buyer of palm oil, historically associated with tropical deforestation, and we're driving that very aggressively. Phasing out of hydrofluorocarbons, we've been leading the way on that. Circular economy, very engaged with Ellen MacArthur and a whole host of others we can talk about later. So footprint, handprint, things that we're doing where we think we can really help change the system. And then thirdly, working very much actively in advocating on public policy and speaking up as a company and putting our lobbying and government affairs muscle behind our values and walking the walk. So helping advance the Paris Agreement, showing up and being very active and supportive of that. The letter that we, along with a dozen other companies, sent to the Trump administration last week on the topic of Paris, we're very much engaged on that front. So the blueprint and making sure our voice is heard as well. The benefits of all of this are something that we're really increasingly beginning to measure. So the brands that, as we define it, we have a kind of a model for how we articulate the brand value proposition. And for those brands at Unilever that put purpose at the core of their brand architecture and actually message that to the consumers, that are actively involved in talking about that with consumers, those brands are growing at a 30% faster rate than the average brands in our portfolio. So purpose does connect. And the role of a brand in today's world is not just quality as it was 100 years ago, or a kind of a light association with lifestyle. It has to do with some deeper meaning and purpose that people, I think, want to see reflected in the ways they spend their money. As a result, the employee engagement, we're the 8th most sought after employer on LinkedIn. The 7 above us are all based in California, I think, and they're all high tech. So, we're a 140-year-old soup and soap company. So what does that tell you? So I think that's been a very important part of our journey.
Great. You mentioned the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which your pin shows all 17 of those. And for those of you who aren't familiar, in September 2015, the nations around the world came together at the United Nations to agree to the Sustainable Development Goals. All 17 of them have targets by 2030. They're everything from fresh water to energy, and energy includes energy access, efficiency, as well as renewable energy goals. And they're quite ambitious, as they need to be. And I think we're increasingly seeing companies use those as guideposts to what extent they're delivering outcomes that matter, that are science-based goals. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that, because one thing I want to make sure we talk about is scale and urgency. I think it's nice to have successful companies that are having some positive impact on the world, but I think the challenge for all of us is really how do we move more quickly?
But it's also about how you galvanize and focus the energy and efforts of people. And I think one of the points that the UN Foundation, who we're also partnering with around the Sustainable Development Goals, makes is that you can't fight it if you don't know what you're fighting for. And I think it's crucial that we get the kind of base level awareness out there around what the 17 goals are, so that we can then start to break down what the actions are around those, whether it be that on a personal level, on a company level, on a societal level. And I think just looking at it from a fashion industry perspective, it's wonderful because it really provides this framework that brands or designers from across the spectrum can look at and understand, okay, where do I sit in this and where do I need to get to, and where collectively can and should we be doing this? So I think it's a brilliant route map that we all need to absolutely step behind, and really, the work that you guys are doing is showing how that's proliferating.
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I would just add one of the exercises that we've been involved in, leading with Paul Pullman's involvement, is a commission chaired by Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who's sort of the father of the Millennium Development Goals at the UN in 2000, called Better Business, Better World. And it looks at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and identifies 60 hotspots of real opportunity where private enterprise and the entrepreneurial human capital and financial capital of the private sector could really accelerate human progress and make good money at it. Better business, better world. And the size of the prize identified in this report that was analytically supported by hundreds of researchers in many countries was about a $12 trillion incremental add to global GDP, 400 million jobs. And Arif Navik spoke about this, the CEO of Abraj Group, at the long-term capital discussion earlier today. But I think, increasingly, I think businesses that are seeing the opportunity to engage around real value creation in that sense, also finding ways to partner. You heard Jim Kim from the World Bank talking about blended finance and the kinds of partnerships that you can crowd in great energy, to help build a purposeful business. It's harder to do if you don't have a shared purpose that serves as a rallying point for that.
Mm-hmm. And I was just hearing that Panera, that they've just passed their goal of 100% clean food, no preservatives, artificial flavors, colors, and they're #1 in customer loyalty for chain restaurants. And so that whole issue of transparency, what's in our food, some of the discussions on food earlier, we're talking a lot about that, of people wanting to know what their food is, where it comes from. Transparency has been a very big issue. I think there's a lot of pressure because information now is so accessible. I was just curious, Joanne, if you could speak a bit to that issue.
People do like to know how you make money on their money. So one of the pages on our site that people visit more than anything is who we are and how we do what we do, and so that's really important to them. So I don't think it matters what you do, right? Like everybody here has had to show the consumer. It used to be like you could have the black box and show up with a box of cereal or a shampoo or a handbag and, even a loan, and it wouldn't matter how you got it. They were just like, that's awesome. But I think now any brand, no matter who you are, you've got to show yourself all the way through, just because of what's happening in social media, what's happening in journalism, what's happening all around the world. So I don't think you can have a trusted brand without that transparency. And if you look at all of the brands that are really surviving and thriving and doing that, right? Like I thought the Amazon to Walmart comparison, Walmart was always a little secretive. Amazon's like, hey man, this is how we do it. This is what we're doing, but not in a overly PR way. I mean, they're probably one of the most secretive companies ever, right? Apple with China, right? Like it gets a little bit, you get into those things. And so I think it's really important how you put that out there. Otherwise you will lose trust from consumers, right? Like it's Uber, Lyft, you can go on and on it. Mm.
Absolutely. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think building on Joanne's comments, I think transparency is a lot easier if it's kind of who you are and it feels like a reflex action. And really that starts with the team who you work with in your respective company. And I'm fortunate to work with a team of people who are very passionate about increasing the access to organic food. So it's kind of a reflex action to be transparent around that. And in fact, this initiative came from our team. So the certified transitional idea came from our team when they were visiting a farm in the Midwest. They were talking to a farmer named Karen, who was an organic farmer, and she was very passionate about organic food and having a good chat and discussion on the farm, as you do. And there was a bit of a light bulb moment for the team. Karen said, even though I'm incredibly passionate about organic food, I would be more inclined to buy a product coming from a farm that was in transition to USDA certified organic than I would buy a product that was USDA certified organic. And that was like, wow, how does that work? Well, clearly, Karen could recognize and empathize with farmers taking on that challenge, that risk, to make that shift from conventional farming practices and techniques to USDA certified organic. And she felt the need to support those farmers with a vote. The issue is, you don't know as a consumer when you're in the store, physical store or virtual store, the information where that product is coming from. So hence our journey on creating the certified transitional mark, our journey around addressing the fact that less than 1% of US farmland is organic. And that's really come from our team, and it's a journey that we're very transparent about.
I know that it does take a fair amount of capital to make that transition. Are there resources out there for the farmers in addition to this stamp of approval? Yeah, that's a good question. There are certainly financial companies that obviously specialize in agricultural finance. Okay. And at Expo West, it's interesting, for the Expo West is the largest natural products expo, I think, in the world, in Anaheim each year in March. And it's really interesting to go to because there's now a lot of bankers and finance people that come to that conference. 20 years ago, it was more hippies. So, there's a lot of interest in financing and helping farms to really ensure that they can move with ultimately what consumers are demanding. They are seeking out more organic options. And yes, financing is part of solving the equation of making organic food more accessible to more people.
The interesting thing is that just the product development piece, like that your customers, we believe that we have our customers sort of, for lack of a better word, dog food our products, right? So when we built our mortgage product, we were like, hey, does anybody want to try this? It's going to be super rough, but we want your feedback through the way. Say every product that we do, we invite them in, they clink around on it and tell us exactly what they like, what they don't like, how they want it represented. And it's not in a focus group way. It's in a sort of hack through it way. And we get much better input and feedback. And our customer folks feel way more empowered, and it's just built a better product for us. So it's the same discovery that you guys had. It's the direct benefit of that willingness to be transparent. Yep. It's not perfect, and you get that direct business benefit. Where I was like, it's never going to be perfect. We know when we start off, there's not that many people that are going to use it, and we're like, hey, look, we know this is not going to be awesome, but you're going to help make it awesome, and they feel very empowered by that, and it's driven word of mouth, and that's one of the largest source channels for us of acquisition is referral and word of mouth, and so it's really important to build that into the cycle no matter what, because I think if you don't have a voice in that, you lose your customer base. Yeah. Jeff talked about some of the collaboratives that you're involved with other companies to make impact and raising your voice on policy. I was just curious if others on the panel are part of industry collaboratives to scale up your impact, take some of your learnings and leadership out to others, and or engaging on policy issues?
The main partnership that we're working towards, we've partnered with different fashion industry brands like Narciso Rodriguez, who you saw we did that video with, but more recently the Rio 2016 Olympics and the BAFTA Awards. And it's been interesting for us seeing how these entities are really now looking to use their platforms positively for sustainable impact on one level or another. And also, I think, kind of segueing back in with the SDGs, we're working, very, very closely on a project to be able to really unpack the goals in partnership with the UN Foundation, and in a way that can really be engaging for young people, because I think what we're seeing is that, that millennial audience is really, they get it. They've kind of arrived on planet Earth in the state that it is, and they just get it. They see that business has to be a tool for change. It has to be a catalyst for positive social and environmental impact. They realize the power of that platform in ways that previous generations just haven't, and are only waking up to in earnest now. And so I think that's really exciting from our perspective, because I think, that generation is looking for brands that they can trust, looking for brands that are delivering on those values, and have been prepared to make the tough choices in order to stay, true to those values. And so I think that's, enormously encouraging, and I think that's where digital technology can be facilitated to really amplify, those positive things, and get the message out there around key collective goals, like the SDGs. So yeah, I think those are the key partnerships.
One thing I want to add about the sort of thinking about the customer. We've built a lot of products in the last 5 years, and we've sort of got a saying in the office: if you want to know what millennials think, just ask, and they will tell you. And every time that we've sort of recalibrated our compass and built sort of selfishly, it never worked out good. And everything we've ever done where we went out, we just put it all out there and said, how do you want to make Tinder better? It worked. And so consider it sort of our little sort of, our treasure map, if you will. But with that comes a lot of courage. Like going out there, for example, Twitter has been out there for years talking about product development and what they're going to do and not do, and they've become sort of a bit of a, I don't want to call them a joke, but people have sort of made fun of their process. So it's the right amount of sharing at the right time. And the one thing that's inspiring about the millennials is their sixth sense, or their ability to really get it. It's absolutely there. It's not false. It's very much from the heart. And every time we can capture that energy and figure out a way to productize it, we succeed. And so do our customers. So that's kind of our mission, building products moving forward.
Great. Any other policy engagement by any of you guys? Financial policy, treatment of student loans on the legislative side with Congress? Any sort of...
Yeah, I mean, we're deep in it right now. Our CEO spoke yesterday on a panel about this, right? Like, regulation and what's going on in this specific category with student loans and just with regulation of financial products. There's a big regulatory change that happens every 25 years that cycles through, and we think that we're just in the middle of that. Is it going to be too much? Is it going to be too little? There's ramifications to both of them. Our goal is just to work closely and be aligned on doing what's best for the consumer and being clear. One of the products that we're developing is we reject a lot of people that apply to SoFi. I think all of you would qualify. We're developing something called the no flow. When we tell them no, that we actually give them all the information about why, and then help them figure out how to move forward. Because it might be a small medical bill, it might be old phone bill, or you really know, like you have some specific problems. But we want to have an NPS for people that we reject as well as people that we take. We think that will be helpful for everybody. But we'd like to get to some place where there's real transparency and regulation and product offering. And, it's every day it changes.
So that's what he's ostensibly advocating for, providing that baseline that protects the consumers. And
yes.
then you can always, and are going far beyond in order to set aside, all of these companies here, right, we're all, the worst is living up to the minimum of compliance. And so I'm just curious.
No, like we have a culture of compliance, and like the CFPB and all the regulatory agencies, we work very closely with them, because we're doing it very differently. We like to be as upfront as possible to be like, hey, here's how it is, and we're the largest lender that's not a bank, right? So we want to make sure that as those rules are rewritten, that everybody's super clear on it. Because we do the securitizations, we go through a due diligence process where we're rated and reviewed and looked at on a regular basis. So, it's part of who we are every day, and we want to make sure that we're, helping build a better environment for regulation.
And I think, a big theme in this panel is obviously innovation. So it's bringing new, fresh thinking to every business, no matter what sort of business you're in. And, that normally starts with identifying pain points, challenges, and then coming up with creative solutions around those. So in our case, with helping farmers who are transitioning to organic, identifying with the fact that my background is more in economics, even though I'm passionate about food, but what we're observing in the supply chain of organic food in the United States is what's referred to in economics as vertical integration. And vertical integration is when companies stray kind of from their core competencies to address what really is market failure. So theory is vertical integration should only occur when there's market failure. And what we're seeing is companies are putting in place long-term contracts for organic supply, or they're even buying up their own organic farmland. And what we're interested in is really an open source approach which can engage consumers in a very transparent way to have an impact on making organic food more accessible to more people. So it's trying to bring innovation to really a market structure that needs some more innovation.
Great. Well, I think I'd love to go out to the audience in a couple of minutes, but I did want to just have you guys weigh in a little bit more on this policy front, because I feel like we're at this moment where there's a level of expectation or responsibility for companies to educate decision makers. And it's not just the national level, it's globally as well as locally, local communities, state level, of what's possible. Because I see a big disconnect. Companies are actually far ahead of our decision makers in so many of these sectors about because technology has enabled a lot more responsible leadership, environmental performance, enhanced environmental performance, et cetera. So I just wanted to tap in a little bit more of that conversation, because it sounded like, for instance, Cameron, with Bottletop, you're doing more of the consumer education about the SDGs with the UN Foundation, and that's critically important to have them engaged and excited about contributing towards them. But I think also this policymaker conversation, government conversation, I just want to know a little bit more for what each of you do in your core business. Are you engaging with the decision makers within your sector? So is anybody else?
Yeah, I can just, a few more examples. One of the things that, for example, we're doing very actively in India is working with the government of India on the Swachh Bharat initiative of Prime Minister Modi, which is around bringing modern sanitation, toilets basically, to households in India, and helping with consumer insights on behavior change that are barriers to achieving that objective, and working with our marketing team to both advance this in terms of public service announcements and understanding the messaging, but also being there as a business, because we want to be part of that evolving reality. I mentioned earlier climate change. Been very involved in advocating for strong climate action, given the urgency of the science on that, and very, very important. Working hard in the context of circular economy. Lobbying in Brussels around the EU directive on circular economy, beginning some work here in the US and in 10 other countries to really get much more on the front foot, and saying, as a consumer goods company, we don't want to see branded litter as a result of our business. And it's something that we need to step up to as a business, but we need to do it in partnership with government. And we acknowledge the reality that this is a real challenge and it needs solutions. So I think, working across that. And I think also, for example, beginning to look at ways to say, if we see opportunities, new innovative kinds of ways of solving some of these challenges, social or environmental challenges, of taking those ideas to government partners at the provincial level, as we're doing in Indonesia on palm oil, to create, produce, and protect kinds of land use compacts in Central Kalimantan and North Sumatra, to really help empower smallholder farmers to get land title so they don't have incentives to slash and burn in order to maintain their own livelihood. So it's both explicit advocacy, we support this legislation, but it's also mutual problem solving around shared agendas and bring the creativity that we in business can bring, the entrepreneurial sort of spirit of how do we solve this, and getting some of our best and brightest. And we see in that, by bringing together partners, we're able to lift much more activity that is at the core of the business we're trying to build, the purposeful business we're trying to build, with the energies of others as well.
Yeah. I mean, in our case, I think it also is about knowing what you're good at and focusing in on that, and then looking at who are the collaborators, who are the public or private partners that can enable you to really scale that in the most meaningful way. Where in Brazil, we've set up an atelier training program supporting people from the area of highest unemployment in Brazil, in the favelas on the outskirts of Salvador. We've now learned a huge amount through that exercise, and where we're now developing product in Kenya and Nepal, we're not going in and trying to, build everything from the ground up, but we're looking for the right partners who have the interest to get people, gainfully employed, upskilled, and so, we're open. I think for us, it's always been about collaboration and collaboration to achieve the greatest impact. So I think for us, getting that right is absolutely key.
One thing that we have, one of our most successful channels is through employers, where we give employers, called SoFi at Work, their employees a tier bump on their rate for refining their student loans, and we're trying to pass. We're working with our competitive set and everybody else. We're trying to support a bill to make student loan contribution tax deductible for corporations, because we have lots of companies. We give every employee $200 a month to help pay down their student loans. We've got a couple dozen companies that participate in that program, and we think it's a benefit that this millennial employees want. But that's going to take a lot of work, to get that done. And so we, work and collaborate with our competitive set.
That's
and
great.
It's a benefit that every company should give their employees, right? Is the ability to get that done sooner.
That's great.
We're very focused on plant-based nutrition and looking at different forms of plant-based proteins. So we all know about the growth in quinoa. A lot of that is sourced from the highlands in Peru. So our team went down there to look at the source of where it's grown. Obviously, it's expanded. But working with the farmers, their biggest issue is they work all day, but then they don't have electricity at nighttime to learn to read, particularly, the family reading together. So we put in place a program where we actually installed solar panels at the villages where we source our quinoa from in the Altiplano region. I'll butcher that because of my Australian accent, of Peru, and really enabled them to get greater access to electricity, which might seem strange for some of us here. And it was mainly around being able to read in the evening because they were so busy, farming during daylight hours. And initiatives like that we really like because, once again, it's bringing that inventor's mindset. It's not just sort of charity. It's actually integrating it with really improvements to supply and the farmers that support your business. And obviously, in our case, support plant-based nutrition.
Right. All right, I'd love to turn to the audience now. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yes. We have a mic. There we go.
Hi, Michael Rodriguez from UCLA. I want to thank you all for being an example of inspiration of how the private sector can do good while you're doing well. You gave lots of great examples. And I guess I'd like to hope that you're part of the leading edge of a movement. And speaking of scaling up this movement, what thoughts do you have about how other companies, other private sector companies, might institutionalize this concept of doing good socially while you're doing well? I mean, how are you going to move it to the next stage?
I mean, fundamentally, I think it always starts at the top. You know, I think that goes without saying. You know, if anything is going to seriously, be advanced and the needle is going to be moved, it has to be part of central strategy, and people have to be accountable for it. You know, it's not. It can't be some marketing buzz thing that is like, oh, this is going to be convenient for us to, to jump aboard for 6 months or this season or this collection, or because we think actually that's what people want at the moment. It's got to be led from the top, and it's got to be part of central strategy. And I think listening to what you've been saying, Jeff, about how Paul is obviously, deeply passionate about that. It's great to hear that from such a huge organization. But it goes for any organization. You know, Bottletop is very small by comparison, but as a team, we're absolutely clear that that's why we do what we do, and I think the old adage of, great companies, successful companies are successful because they know why they do what they do as opposed to knowing what they do.
My only disagreement with that is that, look, I think that your customer and your employee base, understands more, right? My CEO and founder, I didn't have to refi student loans. I have many employees. Most of my employees come from that, right? Like, they come and they cry and they tell you the story of you changing their lives. I had a woman send me a note the other day that was like, hey, look, because I was able to refi my loans, I was able to have enough to go buy get my own apartment and leave my abusive husband, right? Like, you hear these stories day after day and you think like, oh, it's not, refining your loans isn't going to change that. And we take those stories every day and we, build the community. This woman is like, I will volunteer to come and run your community events because some of the most amazing people I've met have been in that, to your point, around the social movement. So we try, we have a private Facebook group with 17,000 people in it that are active every day. Today I was reading, we're talking about like side hustles and, we're doing something, how to ask for a raise, because that was the number one question we got. And I think that, I'm not that person, right? So I've got to trust, like you said, a Tinder, it's like you have to just be like, here, give it to them and trust that they're not going to screw it up because they care a lot about it. And so I just feel like if you're really building a movement, it comes from the movement, right? Like it can't come from on high. It's just, I have a little different opinion on it.
I think it's really it's a two-way street, isn't it? At the end of the day, I think your company values have to be clear. And I think if you're walking that talk, then you're enabling your customers to engage with you on that basis. And I think absolutely giving them the freedom. But I think also that your values have got to be clear.
Jeff?
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think, more and more companies are beginning to see the opportunity here, especially with the demands and interests of millennials. And they're looking at the opportunities for not being able to attract and retain the best talent. That's a very real issue. But I think, there's really no business leader that I know that wakes up in the morning and says, what am I going to do not to help the world today? There's not a lack of intent. The problem is the system is rigged in a way that just drives short-term behaviors, which prevent leaders from being able to step outside that frame and really try to drive long-term value. And that's a tension that we've been working on at Unilever recently, as you may have seen from the Kraft Heinz bid. But I think that is one of the big constraints of getting away from this short-termism, is we can't create long-term value for share owners or stakeholders or society on a quarterly basis. And I think the hardest challenge in business is balancing long and short. Because if all you do is focus on the short term, you can look very good as you die, cut all your training, cut all your quality, all your R&D, cut overheads to the bare bone, and then you implode like a supernova. You're done. So you can have a brilliant short term and no long term. But if you don't have a short term, you don't have a long term. So you have to balance these two. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges. So I think, attacking short-termism is probably the top priority, to unleash business for purpose.
I'd love to go to the audience. Go ahead. We only have a few minutes left. I want to get a couple more in.
Thank you all again very much for your presentations. A lot of this was devoted to talking about, all of the work you've done to really develop, preserve, and continue to lead in terms of how you protect your brand. What keeps you up at night in terms of trying to keep that protected against its potential destruction in the age of social media? And we obviously, your opening remarks, you talked about Pepsi, you talked about United, et cetera. What sort of active steps are you taking, whether you're smaller companies or large institutions like Unilever, especially where you may sometimes not be able to even be in control of the downstream things that could lead to a PR nightmare for you that could really damage your brand?
Well, I think it goes to the transparency theme that we talked about earlier, right? Because you're absolutely right. We have a vast supply chain, and we aggregate all of that to bring to consumers, the products that we all enjoy. But with that comes all the labor and human rights, liabilities and issues or opportunities, as well as all the environmental issues. And I think one of the things that we're talking about internally is how do we become even more radically transparent about that in terms of open grievance process. So we say, these are our values, they're very clear. And in today's world, civil society, satellites, and cell phones are kind of the way these things get measured, not third-party audits and certification programs, which are very clunky and unwieldy. So I think it lies in the question of being very discomforted by radical transparency, because I think down that road is the way to go.
I think another interesting opportunity for a company like Unilever's, and others have done this, acquiring brands that have very strong followings, loyal fans, like Ben & Jerry's, and then
Sir Kensington.
And Sir Kensington, they just
Seventh
acquired
generation.
one of my favorite products, Sir Kensington. It's a plant-based aioli type, and they have a very loyal following and a brand around them. I mean, Ben & Jerry's such a loyal brand, and then you can have that up push of the social and environmental values. Yes, let's go there.
I don't need a mic, I'm okay.
Do we have the mic? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Jeff, you mentioned about the idea of sort of touching in I keep hearing millennial market come up a lot because it's obviously a good low-hanging fruit. They like to get engaged. Once they're engaged, we hope to see some responses. Brian, you mentioned the sort of tragedy that happens, or not really tragedy, I suppose, but the trouble that millennials and young people have in today's society making meaningful connections. Well, that might be a travesty. I think of a lot of the nonprofits I work with that have a lot of senior citizens, a lot of older folks that really have a hard time finding those meaningful connections now. It seems typically within social media that once your mom and grandma joined, it's dead.
Yep.
Is there any way for Tinder to take what is an incredible human experiments, and it's happening, and scale it up without damaging their core audience? I mean, I'm not suggesting do a McDonald's, Chipotle separate brand, but have you ever thought or looked into bringing it to some people who really, really need to make connections to other people?
So one of our fastest growing cohorts is actually 50 and up. And I think that, everyone, Michael Milken has been an idol to me since I've been 15 years old. And this idea of a meaningful life, it doesn't stop when you're 35 and have kids. So one thing that's sort of, I would say, special about our platform is there is no discrimination. If you have a Facebook account or soon to be a telephone number, you can opt in. And I think it's just sort of a natural progression of technology where, of course, it's going to start. The diffusion will start with 18 to 20-year-olds. But we're already seeing it, like, this is no joke, the 15 over cohort is exploding. So I think that what drives adoption of products like ours is word of mouth. And I think one of the things that people need to know is they can go on to Tinder when you're 55 or 65 or even 80 and find new people. And I think it's powerful. And the idea that it's location specific is even, I think, more of a pro sort of in that vein. Now, do we actively market to that audience? I mean, there's obviously this balance because if you're talking to 19-year-olds, you can't be talking to 70-year-olds. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. And also, you're going to see a lot of niche variations. There already are, 1,000 knockoffs of Tinder, and I'm sure someone will do something a little bit more thoughtful in the space. But I think it's a very, very important issue.
Yes, right here.
Hi, I want to throw out a slightly different premise, and that is we're all, as marketers and observers of life and what's going on generationally, we're all very fixated and have been for years now on the millennial and how the millennials, their attitudes or values are changing the world. And I come at it a little bit differently because I'm a reader, I'm an observer, just like most of the people in this room. And that is, I think the big disruptor out there has been technology, and the millennials are the early adapters. Yeah. But I would caution everybody as a marketer to make their models around millennials. Sure, as they age, people will backfill behind them with some of the same values and some of the same attitudes. But what's going to continue to evolve, and faster than we can even wrap our heads around it, is this technology disruption, which some of you upstairs, particularly the gentleman from Tinder, knows so much about. But that I would focus your efforts not just on one generation, focus it on all generations, because I share many of the same values that my kids do. I'm 60-something, sure. They're hovering either side of 30, and I don't think it's that one-directional, and it's too tightly focused, and I think you got to expand it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more, I think.
Well, state of mind.
Yeah.
I just want to know how much the handbag is.
That's a great.
I want to guess the price point. Guess the price point.
The discount for panel.
Well, hang on.
wait.
You've given me the alley-oop there. So we have Milken, the Milken Institute has been incredibly forward-thinking in inviting Bottletop to create a stand to showcase our work and our collection and how sustainable design is impacting communities. So we can give you some price information and possibly some discount information around the corner outside the ball.
But not on the panel.
No.
Just not on the panel.
That's a great way, I think, to wrap up the panel. And I think just one thing to leave us with is I think all of us need to think about how do we leverage all of our assets across our operations, our customers, our employees in our lives every day, all these food panel discussions we've been having, what we're eating, how much we're flying. That's my advice. So let's all just, I think, work together. And thankfully, we have companies like this who are helping to make it easier for all of us. So please join me in thanking the panel for today and for their work.